Welcome to the Horror Interview Show. I'm Skullface. Today I'm interviewing Jon Garcia about directing and co-writing Summoning the Spirit. What inspired the idea behind Summoning the Spirit?
During the pandemic, I had a lot of time to write. A lot of us had some extra time on our hands, and I'd always wanted to write a creature feature. I live in the Northwest, in the Pacific Northwest, where it's hard to avoid Bigfoot. Bigfoot is just kind of everywhere, bumper sticker statues. There's a museum out here for Bigfoot. There's sightings out here, and I think over time it just kind of just made an impression on me and myself and the co-writer Zach. We started to develop a script and it went through many iterations, and eventually we landed on this story about a cult. We were both enthused and interested in cults, and I think we both watched a ton of documentaries about it. We Wild Country, I think it was called, produced by the Duplass brothers, and did our own research. Of course, movies like Midsummer are really inspiring, you know. And so we just developed a script over time, and we started to throw back and forth like what this cult believes in, and we threw in ideas of Taoism and Catholicism, Buddhism. Some we just made up out of thin air about this cult and why they're there in the forest, and why Bigfoot is kind of their, the creature that they look up to, and the creature they're trying to protect. And we developed this story, and then yeah, that's what inspired Summoning the Spirit.
What were the main challenges of creating such a movie?
There's a lot of challenges. First of all, this was my first creature feature, and so having somebody in a suit and finding a suit, and then luckily we had some assistance from somebody who's a legend in the horror world, and Greg Hale, who is the one of the producers of the Blair Witch Project. He's somebody who taught me about creature motivation and things I'd never even thought of before, and he also was the person who lent us the suit from his movie Exists from 2014, which is also a Bigfoot creature feature. And yeah, dealing with the effects, the little bit of pyrotechnic, just a little bit, and the blood and the prosthetics. Luckily we had somebody very talented on prosthetics, and a lot of the practical effects, and Melissa Barackman. And then Kara Peterbaugh did all our makeup effects, most of our makeup effects, and handled the Bigfoot suit. She was responsible for the suit, making sure it was intact and well kept, and made sure it didn't smell too bad, and things like that. So those were the challenges. Also making a movie, indie movie that, for around 160K, that should have probably been a lot more, but that's what we had to work with. And so, like, yeah, financial challenges, shooting overnights, in Portland, where it gets darker later, gets lighter earlier, and so trying to keep the crew and the cast and everybody well fed and energized throughout the process proved to be a very tough thing. This is the hardest movie I have ever made by far.
Do you like directing and what do you like about it?
Yeah, I love directing. It's kind of my favorite thing in the world, is to work with actors, and just I think a director's job is to take the script, and you get to the location, you get to where you get to the place on the day, and you're there with the people, and sometimes you haven't had a chance to rehearse anything. Normally you don't in independent film. I haven't had a chance to rehearse much since my first movie, my debut movie, The Falls, and so I mean I love just figuring it out on the go, what it has to be, the way it really works, what dialogue isn't working, what objectives need to be just tweaked further. I really like playtime with the actors. That's kind of why I do this. I love writing, I love editing, I love the whole process, but the real magic for me, and for I think a lot of directors, is being there on set, and just watching it come to life, watching the words come to life, and making those little changes that you have to make so that it all works.
What are the main challenges of being a director?
I think the main challenges, I think, is figuring out how what everybody needs. Everybody needs something a little bit different. I feel you direct everybody kind of differently, and there's some actors that a few actors on this film that just kind of got it. They knew it. They didn't really need a whole lot from me after the first few days. And that's I think that's what happens when you keep making movies and you cast your movies right. It's just they knew it. They're there. Sometimes you can get in their way. Sometimes I think directing, like, you can just sometimes just throw a lot of information at an actor, and they're like, whoa, 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 that's a little bit too much. I've heard some people say, like, sometimes it's just you give them as much information between takes as like you would give like a fighter who's like, you know, who's in between rounds, like if you throw a lot of things at them, they have a lot on their mind, they're literally in the midst of a lot, and so you throw something simple, one thing, give them one thing, one tweak. And sometimes you don't, sometimes you try, hey, just try it again. Let's try it again. Let's go a little further with that. I've heard you shouldn't tell actors to pull back. I haven't had a good I haven't come up with anything better to say to pull back, maybe a little bit less. I think just figuring out what people need, and knowing when not to give them too much, and knowing when you need to give them more. And I think that's from an actor standpoint, from the production standpoint, from the tactical standpoint, like, yeah, knowing where you want to put the camera, knowing how to tell the story with the camera, and not forgetting that as a tool. And also, including your DP and the art department into the narrative, and providing enough for everybody, for your entire team, so that they feel like they're being heard, and so they feel like they're part of the story, because they, at the end of the day, like, all of us are making this thing together. And I think even the wardrobe in this movie, I love it. Like Faith Geiger, like, really, like, just killed it. I thought that Kevin Forrest killed it with the cinematography, doing some good handheld work. I think Melissa with the practical effects, and then Carrie with, if we didn't have her taking care of the Bigfoot suit, I mean, washing it with you know, alcohol every night. I mean, to keep it, yeah, from developing bacteria that would harm Sean, who was our Bigfoot. Also, like, another challenge was directing a creature to be in a Bigfoot suit. I'd never done that before. Luckily I have some acting training, and we did some animal work at some point in time. That's something a lot of actors do. There's classes on animal work, on getting kind of back to, like, who we are as visceral creatures, as mammals. And so, and the cult in this film, the mountain people, they do that. That's part of their exercise. I mean, so yeah, I think it's, as the challenges of a director, it's just like there's just so many, that's just production, pre-production, the planning, and in post, it's like, telling the story again for the third time, and letting music become part of that, and knowing what didn't work, finding out what didn't work, not being attached to something that took you, like, an entire day to shoot, and you just easily say, like, what, I know we spent all this time on this thing, but we don't need this scene. So, I mean, there's so many challenges, and it's a hard thing to master, and I maybe never will. And so I think that's what's so great about it.
Were any scenes difficult to film?
There were a lot of scenes that were very difficult to film, especially um, everything with the monster, with the creature, was hard to film, because you just don't know if it's working or not. Is this scary? Is this gonna scare people? Is this, does this make sense? Of course, in the narrative, is just like frivolous gore for, for nothing. So I think all the scenes, that had our Bigfoot in it, the preparation for those scenes, the 2.5 hours or so that Sean would spend in makeup, that was yeah, sometimes we go longer, and that's how long it needed to be, and he'd show up, and he'd look like a badass Sasquatch, and he'd be ready to go. Sean also couldn't eat once he put the teeth in, and dude was starving. Was he was there all night. You know, yeah, there was one scene where we lost a good part of the day for several reasons. We had to make sure that one of our actors was okay. Had a medical thing come up, and so yeah, we lost a lot of time that day. All the scenes with all the cult members that when you're managing like 20 or 30 people and the crew, those scenes were all pretty tough, but also really exhilarating to just kind of have that energy right in front of you, and just to watch it all come to life. So those scenes are both difficult, and they're really exhilarating, and they really challenge you as a creative. So I think the more difficult scenes were some of the funnest too, and then you get into the technical, and all the things that can go wrong with the technical. And so yeah, I mean, even the easy scenes were like so difficult to a degree. We're always fighting either at the where the cult lived, we're fighting the sounds of construction nearby. And when we were filming at the location where Carla and Dean live at, we were fighting the fact that it was like not too far from a very busy high speed freeway, and they're supposed to be out in the middle of nowhere, so it made sound design pretty challenging, so yeah, there were a lot of tough scenes.
Do you have a favorite moment from the movie?
I think my favorite moment, I want to think about this for a second, Skullface. I think my favorite scene might be there's one scene where Carla is in an intimate moment with Dean, her husband, but she's actually thinking about being out in the forest, and she lays down in the grass, and 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 she's suddenly in the grass when she was just in the bed, and she is almost like having a dream, and like in that dream Sasquatch is like speeding by through the woods, and these are three different scenes we shot that are all strung together. And I think it raises a lot of questions for the audience about what is happening, and I know what's happening, but I just kind of wonder what the audience takes away from it. That, and I love the scene where what there's a big climax at the end, where we do see Sasquatch and all her glory, and that scene is really really fun. It's like no scene I've ever shot in my life, and there's a lot of action and a lot of things happening in it. So those are two of my favorite scenes. There's more, but those are the only two that are coming to mind.
You wrote this movie with a co-writer. Would you say that having a co-writer is easier or harder than writing alone, and why?
I think having a co-writer in this case was really just a wonderful thing because we were both writing several scripts at the same time. And I've known Zach long enough that I trusted him. I trusted what he would write. If he wrote something that that I wasn't feeling, I could change it. And if he, if I wrote something that he wasn't feeling, he could change it. We can always talk about it. I think what I liked most about working with Zach is he doesn't have an ego. And I've got more of an ego than he does, and I don't think I have a big one, but I think that I think because I've known him for years, because we worked on our first film together. It's actually where we met on my the first film I made, Tandem Hearts. It wasn't my debut; it didn't come out till way after The Falls, which was my first movie. But I think there's just a certain comfortable, just like an effortlessness to working with him. So I think I could say that co-writing this was it wasn't hard at all. Not with Zach.
Who are your favorite horror writers and directors?
My favorite horror writers and directors. Well, I love Ari Aster. I think he's great. Um, believe it or not, I know he gets a lot of flack, but I like M. Night Shyamalan. I like that he, cruised out at 29 and made Sixth Sense, like a movie that, still one of the best kind of supernatural movies, you know. I think he's a lot of fun, and I've liked even the films that have been, not as highly regarded by critics, and Greg Hale, and I think what I like about Greg Hale, and first of all, I'm to meet him and just for him to help us the way he helped us, and he didn't need to help us. We're here in Oregon, we're here in Portland, so is he, and he's got plenty of other things to do, but just being where he's at in his career and where he's come from. I mean, I went back and I watched all his work, and it was really inspiring. I realized a lot of his work is about what happens to people when they run into things situations they've never encountered before, and how things fall apart, on a personal level, as these few people are trying to figure out a way out of this very intense otherworldly situation, like it exists, and the Blair Witch Project, and so he's as I went back and watched all his films, I started to become even more enamored by him, also because he's just a sweetheart of a man, a good man. I think that just made me love his work all the more.
How do you generally get funding for your projects?
Funding for my films has come from all sorts of different ways. I funded one of my first movies with a student loan, and I've gotten after that. I had the distribution companies kind of put in a little bit of money here and there. I had a friend of mine. He's now a friend of mine. His name's Rodney Moore. He saw one of my films, was touched by it, and he reached out to me, and he became a contributor, and is now like he's one of the founding members of my company, and so that's one way. There's people that just have contributed through various fundraising outlets, fiscal sponsorships, um, and so it's any number of ways. Only recently have I started working with investors and executive producers, and working in that way, developing waterfall agreements and all that. So it's just been all over the map.
How did you get into creating screen productions?
I came from the music world. I was and still am a touring singer-songwriter. I don't tour as much anymore. I don't play out as much anymore, but I still record. I released an album about a year ago, and so I my love for music brought me to working in the live music world here in Portland, Oregon, at the Doug Fir Lounge. And I think while I was a production assistant, loading bands in, loading bands out, you're putting on an event. You got from like 2 p.m. in the afternoon until like 2 a.m. In the middle of the night, to put on a great show and bring money to the club and make sure that everything is prepared for the artists and for the audience members. And yeah, just seeing the throughput of a night like that, I think that guided me also towards movie production. And I remember like kind of at the end of the night doing all, because I did everything there, including like paying bands and whatnot. Sometimes I did live sound for the side shows, outside shows. And we're like mopping the floor and like thinking about what my working through script issues I was having at the time. But that taught me how to work through a 12-hour day and get as much done as I could, more than I thought I could get done, and dealing with a whole lot of issues that come up along the way that are unexpected. And that's kind of what filmmaking is. So I think, just being already in the music industry and being on the other side of that, and then working in the music industry as from the production side, that also helped as well.
What do you like about the producing side of things?
What I like about the producing side of movie making is that I really love just bringing the people I've loved working with in the past and bringing them into new projects I'm working on. I love telling people, hey, we're going to do something that I've never tried before. Some of my counterparts, people I work with, have always wanted me to make a horror film, and when I finally did, they were just like, yes, finally, you're finally doing something that I really love. And I actually found a lot of things I like about making horror films. For the producing side of things, I mean, um, I like being able to go out and raise money myself for a project, and not have to necessarily wait for finding fundraisers and that sort of thing. I've in a lot of cases I've raised money, myself, and like I said, only recently have I started, going more this and this more like waterfall agreement route with investors and things like that. Also producing is, it's putting it all together, and luckily I had a great counterpart, somebody that I started working with on 2 films ago. We've done our last 3 features together. Her name's Lacey Todd. She's a great producer. And I think she was an AD, and then when I brought her on to Lake, she became a producer, and just watching her produce 2 movies at once, because we made 2 back to back one time, 3 weeks apart, and it drove us both crazy. And she was carrying a lot of the load, and just seeing what we can do, what we can accomplish in a short amount of time. And watching things kind of fall apart, and then knowing that we can rebuild them back together again. That's an incredible side of producing. It's just like nothing. There's nothing that you can't that you encounter that you can't push through and make work. And that's what I like about producing, and great producers like Lacey, and like Joe Jadko, who's also on this film, who was solid producer that he put fires out. He's great at putting fires out. Things happen, he deals with them. He liked to deal with them, and I don't necessarily love to deal with the fires, especially when I'm in a creative space. So yeah, it's there's so much I love about producing and the whole process. At the same time, I also just like to just be a director and just direct and stay on the creative side of things, which, not to say that producing isn't creative, it can be, and it is sometimes. But yeah, it's nice to give up the reins to somebody else too.
Aside from summoning the spirit, what screen production that you've done are you most pleased with?
I think the some movies I'm very pleased with that I've done in the past. I really love my film Lose. I worked with the same actors who are also in Summoning the Spirit, 2 of them, 2 of the leads, Jesse Taya and Ernesto Reyes. Lose is a prison drama. It's about 2 men that meet in prison, and they form a relationship, they form a bond, spending a lot of time together. And when they get out of prison, they kind of deal with the aftermath of what it means to now be outside of prison. Like, do they still have the same bond? Do they not? Like, what is it? What's left? And so I really love that story. And I also love The Falls, the film, my debut movie about 2 Mormon missionaries that meet on their mission, and form a relationship and deal with opposition from their church. And I also love my film Sex Weather. You only asked for one, but I'm giving you 3. Sorry. Sex Weather is a film about 2 people that have a one-night stand, and then they end up talking in bed all day the next day, and just have all these existential conversations about love and life and death, and what they truly want, what they wish they had, the regrets they have. And it's just I find it to be a really cathartic experience for me. As all writers and directors and creators, we all put ourselves in our own movies, and I think that one, definitely at that time, there's a lot of me in it.
What would you say to people who want to make movies but think that it's too hard?
I don't know if people think making movies is hard anymore. I don't know, since we're in a media we're such an media-based society now. I think anybody and everybody, can make a movie, and I think a lot of them realize that they can. I think for anybody who wants to make a feature film, and is scared of putting that all together, and I think my problem is that I've always seen it as like, oh, it'll be simple. I'll just, I'll write the thing, and then I'll, make sure I have I'll shoot it, or I'll get another, cinematographer to shoot it. We'll make sure the actors show up in time, and we'll just do the thing. That's always how I've seen it. And of course, it's way harder than that. But I've always seen it as a simple thing, and to fault maybe, So I think, if anybody sees it as a this huge undertaking, which it is, but I think breaking it down to its simplest, what do you really need to be there to create your story, and starting simple, a two-person chamber drama isn't a bad place to start. I think from the audience, from the consumer perspective, maybe that's a little bit played out, especially during the pandemic, because there was a lot of those. I made one, for instance, Love and Dangerous Times, which is a great little chamber drama about two people in the pandemic. But I think keeping it simple, and like really like, casting the right people, and making sure that you're saying what you want to say in your dialogue, and not being afraid to change it if it doesn't feel right. And I always try to write my screenplays in a way that I'm never afraid to start all over again. I don't want to be stuck to anything. Don't be afraid to just start from page one if you have to make it right. Yeah, and I think just doing it, just going out there and just actually just do it, just make the thing, and know that as the filmmaker, like no one's going to care probably as much as you do. And so you just have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and you know, and also, like, you don't have to spend years on a project. I think that can be detrimental to the piece and to the spirit of the artist. I think getting through a piece of art while it's still warm, while it's still fresh, is great for the piece and for everyone involved in it.
Where can people watch Summoning the Spirit?
People will be able to watch Summoning the Spirit on most of the major platforms. And for instance, like, I know I believe it'll be on iTunes, I think Roku, and I think Comcast, Amazon. It's going to be on most of the video on demand platforms. I was trying to find it right now as I was saying this. I couldn't. So, but it'll be on most VOD platforms, and then hopefully we'll be on a streamer at a later date, maybe in November or December.
Where can people follow you?
People can follow me on Instagram at Jon Garcia without an H. So it's at Jon Garcia PDX. And that's for Facebook and for Instagram, and on TikTok at JGJAYGEE. And I think they can also email me at jon.lakeproductions@gmail.com.
I would like to thank Jon for the interview. People watching can like, comment, share, subscribe, and whatever else people do to videos if you're watching in the future.